Hello and welcome to session 4 of the Dads Matter course. Today we will be exploring why we discipline our children, and by the end of this session we will be able to name some of the things to consider when disciplining children and how to ensure children know our expectations. Let's start by answering this question. Feel free to pause the video to help. What is the difference between discipline and punishment? Discipline is about teaching and learning, about responsibility and control of self. Discipline is much easier if communication is clear, listening is good, and there is an understanding of why children behave as they do. Effective discipline is to teach children what is right, not to keep punishing them for doing wrong. There are different ways to teach our children. These aspects of teaching can be specific. You let your child know exactly what they are doing, right or wrong. Responsive, when you help your child understand the relationship between what they do and what happens as a result. Concrete, this is when you give your child clear examples of how to improve their behaviour in the future. Positive, so we help our child learn self-discipline, to be in control of their actions and expression of emotions. Interactive, giving your child a chance to show what they have learned. You are an active part of the learning process. You and your child work together towards a common goal. Informative, you become the teacher, the coach, as you give information that helps your child learn to solve problems. Consequences affect all of us. They are both negative and positive. Consequences help children to learn that their actions lead to results, both positive and negative. They teach children to think. We use them because they are at work all around and on us all the time. They teach your child to think about his or her actions. Your child learns that actions lead to results and life is full of choices. To affect behaviour, consequences must be important to your child. It has to mean something to your child. Immediate, give a consequence right after the behaviour occurs or as soon as possible. Infrequent, don't use the same consequences too often. Considered, give the smallest consequences possible that will affect the behaviour. Dependent on behaviour, privileges only after specific tasks are complete. One activity is linked to the other. Pre-planned, set consequences in advance and let your child know about them. And avoid empty warnings. Be clear and follow through. For our next activity, please think about and write down examples for the following questions. Please pause the video whilst you complete this to help. Give examples of positive consequences used in disciplining your children to help them change their behaviour. Also, give examples of negative consequences used in disciplining your child due to their challenging behaviour. Things children like and are willing to work to get is what positive consequences are all about. Behaviour that is followed by a positive consequence is likely to be repeated. It's not a bribe, don't reward inappropriate behaviour, but it increases or encourages desired behaviour, increases the amount of time children spend doing positive things. And then with negative consequences, these are things children don't like and want to avoid. Negative consequences encourage children to change their behaviour or control their actions. There are two forms: removal of privileges or adding a chore. It's not a punishment, and it should decrease negative or undesired behaviour, and sometimes requires positive role model as well. It should be logical, fair, and consistent. Consequences should address the behaviour in question, and it should not be given in anger. Let us now think about possible examples of choices and consequences. The choices should be non-threatening choices and offered in a calm manner. Example, you can stay here and watch the TV with me quietly, or you can play noisily in the garden. You decide which. Consequences need to be logical and natural consequences related to the behaviour rather than punishments we have thought up unconnected to the behaviour. Example, child does not put away a special toy. Child has to look and find it himself, perhaps with support from a parent if necessary. For the next activity, please write down 2 examples of using choices and 2 examples of using consequences to help in the discipline of our children. Now we will look at some examples of discipline strategies you may want to try depending on the age of the child and the situation. Positive reinforcement, focusing on good behaviour instead of bad behaviour. Parental attention is one of the most powerful forms of positive reinforcement. Redirecting. This technique literally involves the simple act of redirecting your child to appropriate behaviour. Verbal instruction, explanation. Going over what you want your child to do and why it can help him or her develop good judgment. Establishing rules. Explain your rules and be prepared to repeat them until your child learns to follow them on his or her own. Grounding. A technique effective with school-age children and teenagers. It involves restricting your child to a certain place, usually home or his or her room. Withholding privileges. Children should learn that privileges come with responsibility and they need to be earned. A privilege that is valued by the child, such as playing on their tablet or using their phone, watching TV or playing with friends, should be removed. Please write down other discipline strategies that can help in positively teaching our children and changing their behaviour. Please pause the video to give yourself plenty of time for this. In any challenging situation, use the traffic light model. Red, stop. Amber, think. Green, act. Sometimes we rush ahead to deal with the situation, but it's important that we take a moment to stop and then to think and process what's happening and how best to deal with it. And then green, the act, the go, and to try and then address the situation in a more positive way. And when you act, follow these 3 steps. 1, describe what you would like. Be specific, clear, make sure your child understands. 2, give a reason. This helps your child to understand why the behaviour is important. And 3, practice. This confirms the understanding, gives you a chance for praise and lifts your child's self-esteem. In this session, we have explored the difference between discipline and punishment. We have discussed the best ways to teach our children and explored the effective use of positive and negative consequences. We have reviewed different discipline strategies and the importance of clear and consistent communication when explaining choices and consequences. Remember, Dad, you are one of your children's most influential teachers in their lives. Take time to think and reflect about some of the main things you can teach your children in daily life. Thank you for joining me today. Next time we'll be looking at a dad's role as a supporter, the 5th session and last part of the Dads Matter course. I look forward to seeing you then. I'm with Carl again in our interview together, and he's sharing about his role as a teacher in the life of his child and how Dad's Matter has helped him in this. So the fourth session of Dad's Matter, we talked about Dad being a teacher and how our role is to discipline, to instruct, to guide. And we reflected on how discipline isn't to do with punishment, because punishment comes from a place of anger, and it's really given our children a hard time, if you like, for the wrong they've done, when discipline is teaching right from wrong. And it's not something we should do in anger, but calmly but firmly address behaviour that needs to change, and to teach our children that choices have consequences. And we discipline them because we want to help them to learn, to grow, to make better decisions in the future. So I just wondered if you wanted to share anything from that session that's really helped you as you've reflected on being a teacher.
What I learned from this was a whole different approach from what I had done with my son previously. As I said, growing up, discipline to me was you did something wrong, you got very, very harsh punishment. And with myself being the eldest one, I was responsible for two younger brothers. And if they did something wrong, because I was the eldest one, I got disciplined very, very harshly.
Okay.
With my son, when he used to do things wrong, I used to shout, yell, and he used to get frightened, which, having gone through the course, made me realise that no, this isn't right. But it was only the only way I knew.
Yeah.
Having done the course and learnt that, yes, children can be a little mischievous, can bend the rules slightly, and manipulate one parent against the other. What I took away was that if your child does something wrong, you give them a choice.
Yeah.
If you carry on, then you're going to lose an hour of the internet tonight. But if you behave in a better way, then come the weekend we'll go and do something.
Yeah.
But you have to behave for the rest of the week. If you don't behave, then what we were going to do at the weekend we'll have to look at and change in a way. But you have to give them a couple of chances.
Yes. Yeah.
It's no hard fast rule, because when you do the hard fast rule, which is what I did, you don't get anywhere, because yes, they are learning, and as I said, the life coach scenario comes in. You have to guide them, and through life you have to bend a little. You can't be solid.
Sure.
Nothing in this world is fixed. You've got to learn to adapt. Same with bringing up a child. They have to look at you and learn from what you're doing. And the only way they're going to learn is if by having a little exploration along that little line, and then you bring them back and say, well, no, that's not quite right. Do it this way, and we can still do this. But if you don't, then unfortunately we might not be doing that. And then it gives them the chance to grow within themselves and make their own decision without you being too harsh on them. You make them realise, oh, I've made the blunder, not you telling them. Because then when you keep telling them, it makes them feel smaller and smaller and smaller, and then they don't grow as well.
That's right.
Which is what happened to myself.
So the context is always one of encouragement and finding a positive way to discipline our children. So it's not just about withdrawing things when they do something wrong, but it's inspiring them, if you like, to make good choices, and there's the reward there. So it's those positive consequences due to the positive behaviour, and when they're taken on board what you're saying and making those adjustments. And you're so right about being flexible. You know, as our children grow, as they get older, you communicate rules clearly, but there's still a need to adapt those rules as you go along. And I remember one of the particularly helpful things we discussed was the traffic light strategy. The traffic light strategy is great because you're not jumping in, you know, overreacting, but the red is you stop before you do anything, and then the amber is the think, right, how can I best communicate to my child here and help them? How can I address the situation? There needs to be discipline, but I want to approach it in the right way. So you're giving yourself space to process that, and then your green is your act, is you go and to implement and deal with the situation in the best way. So again, it all goes back to assertive parenting as our foundation for how we approach discipline in all aspects of parenting. So well done, because again, it's great to hear evidence of how you're putting this into practice and teaching your son so well, and it's clearly helping him and it's helping both of you.
But what I will say is, going from the red to the green might not be a minute, might not be 10 minutes, it could be an hour. You've just got to gauge the situation.
Yeah.
Because if you try and do it like a true traffic light, you could burst that bubble.
Yeah.
And the rage can come out, which is not a good thing. From my own experience, it's not nice.
And then it goes back to what we said about looking after ourselves, because if we're not stressed out and we're more in control of our emotions, we can deal with the discipline in a more positive, constructive way without letting anger take over. So by looking after ourselves, we can then best handle these situations and get the best outcome for the children.
And as you say, in the situation, if you feel you're going to come to that ultimate, remove yourself.
Yeah.
Like I have to remove yourself. If it's not working, just come away.
Yeah.
And then just let them carry on. And I have done. And I've tackled it 2 or 3 days later.
Yeah.
And got a better result, as opposed to staying in that moment.
Yeah.
And then arguing it out with the child.
That's right.
Because whatever you say, a child will always come back at you.
Yeah, they've always got an answer.
No matter what you say, they have that answer, and you can feel your little inner self boiling up, which is no good, because they know they're winning, and they're going to keep winding that little coil.
Yeah.
And that spring will go ding, 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 and then all of a sudden it'll just snap.
Yeah.
And yes, I've done it.
And this is why timeout's needed for us just as much as it's needed for our children.
It's better to say, excuse me, I need 5 minutes, as opposed to blowing up and ruining a whole day because of one small incident.
Yeah, there's a way to diffuse that, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing about how you're really embracing your teacher role.
Thank you.